I'd like to start off with whatever Renee said. I agree. I am the co-chair of the Walleye Task Group, along with Todd Wills, who's somewhere back there from Michigan DNR. And so it gives me my pleasure today to do the Walleye Task Group report for 2014. This year, the Walleye Task Group did meet at Old Woman's Creek in Huron, Ohio. And the task group members are listed there. We had one minor change with Mark Turner out of Ohio retiring this past fall. I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank the folks at Old Woman Creek for putting us up for a week, and as well as ODNR for helping with the accommodations. This being the State of the Lake year, and we've seen this already from Kurt's presentation about the fact that it is the Lake Erie goal to secure a balanced, predominant cool water fish community with walleye as a key predator in the Western Basin, Central Basin, and the nearshore waters off the Eastern Basin, and characterized by a self-sustaining indigenous and naturalized species that occupy diverse habitats, provide valuable fisheries that reflect a healthy ecosystem. Kurt also did mention a number of objectives listed in the Fish Community Goals and Objectives for Lake Erie. The ones bolded in dark here actually refer specifically to walleye themselves. And I'd point out that we would like to see a sustainable harvest of walleye in the western, central, and nearshore areas of Eastern Basin, as well providing some of the habitat nearshore and riverine and estuary habitat for recruitment of walleye. The other objectives here do touch on walleye as well in terms of ecosystem conditions. Kurt mentioned that we would like to see a mesotrophic lake that would support a perkid community. We know that walleye would contribute to the productivity and yield objective that Kurt had mentioned. We'd also like to see low contaminants, if not no contaminants, in walleye. We always strive to protect, restore, and enhance the fish habitat in Lake Erie, including some protection of the genetic diversity that's there. So whether that's a Maumee stock, an East Basin stock, a Grand River stock, or a shoal spawning species, we prefer the genetic diversity. As well as looking at the food web structure and allowing for that flow of energy to go through from the primary productivity up to our forage fish that will feed our top predators like walleye. For this presentation, I'm going to focus mainly on the charges for the task group, the fisheries highlights from last year, look at the walleye stock estimates for the time series, as well as provide the harvest policy and recommended allowable harvest for 2015. Start off with a review of charges. The Lake Erie Committee has given the Walleye Task Group 4 main charges for this year. Most of these have been ongoing charges. The first one, maintain and update the centralized time series of data sets required for population models and assessment, including tagging, population indices, and abundance, growth, and maturity, and then looking at the fish harvest and effort by grid. The second charge is to improve the existing population models to produce the most scientifically defensible and reliable method for estimating and forecasting abundance, recruitment, and mortality. And the sub-charges here are actually coming from the LEC process that Renee talked about. And they are looking at additional exploration of recruitment indices for incorporation into the catch-at-age model, explore ways to account for tag loss, non-reporting, and natural mortality estimates for the statistical catch-at-age modeling, and explore and advise on the feasibility of integrating the East Basin walleye assessment into a lake-wide management. I'm not going to talk about these today, but I can tell you that these charges are being looked at and work is ongoing. The last 2 charges report on the recommended allowable harvest for this upcoming year in 2015. and provide guidance recommendations for future tagging strategies to the LEC. Fisheries highlights for 2014. I'll put this up just as a reminder that when we speak of TAC with relevance to Lake Erie, that Lake Erie is actually divided in two areas. The non-TAC area, which is the east end of the lake, makes up management units 4 and 5. And then the international TAC area, which would be the west basin and central basins of Lake Erie. That being said, when we actually look at the walleye harvest for last year, this would come from the TAC areas, and you'll see it down here from the respective agencies themselves. Overall last year, TAC or quota is in the blue bars, and then what was harvested is in the green bar. So overall for the TAC area, so excluding Pennsylvania and New York, almost 2.7 million walleye were harvested last year, or 66% of quota of 4.03 million fish. Ontario harvested 1.32 million fish last year, and that's a combination of both our commercial harvest as well as our sport harvest. Ontario last year did actually conduct a lake-wide aerial creel, so we do have estimates that are into this number. It represents 76% of the quota that were allocated to Ontario last year, which was 1.73 million fish. Ohio followed fairly close behind at harvesting 1.3 million fish last year, or 63% of their quota of 2.06 million. And finally, Michigan harvested 42,000 fish from their allocation of just a little over 200,000. When we look at harvest by fisheries, with up here on top in the blue is the Ontario commercial fisheries harvest, and then on the bottom it's the sport fish harvest, measured in millions of walleye. Last year, Ontario commercial fishers harvested 1.292 million walleye, which is up 3% from the previous year. You'll notice that on time series, I've put these little bars to identify the reporting year for State of the Lake. And you can see that for the commercial harvest, it's been pretty steady over the last 6 years. In terms of sport recreational fisheries harvested 1.57 million fish last year, up 23% from 2013. And you can see in the same reporting time frame, going up from a low in 2011. That 2011 low is a year that the West Basin was plagued with algae, as well as a really bad weather year as well. So I don't think it was an indication of abundance, more of a lack of fishing opportunities. When we look at walleye commercial harvest by management unit, and we're going from west to east, with the blue bar here on top being the West Basin. In 2014, in Management Unit 1, 756,000 fish were harvested. That's up 3% from the previous year. In Management Unit 2, 259,000 fish were harvested, down 13% from the previous year. In Management Unit 3, 238,000 pounds. In Management Unit 4, 41,000 pounds. And you see that those represent some of the highest increases in harvest from the previous year. When we look at the sport fishery harvest by management unit, again, starting from west to east, looking at management unit 1 with the majority of the harvest coming out of Ohio waters, 996,000 fish harvested last year, up 17% from the previous year. Almost no change in management unit 2, a slight decrease of 1%. Of 190,000 fish harvested. Management unit 3 and 4, again representing some of the larger harvest areas, increased from the previous years, 231,000 fish from management unit 3 and 160,000 fish harvested in management unit 4. When we look at the harvest across the lake, you'll see here the blue dots on top representing the commercial harvest in Ontario waters, the red dots being the sport fisheries in US waters. The larger the dot, the larger the harvest, and you can see that predominantly the harvest is coming out of the West End for both the commercial and sport fishery, with harvests also coming out of the ports in Wheatley, outside of Erio and Port Stanley, and then again some recreational harvests out of Ashtabula down in the east. When we look at the walleye effort by the fishery, again on top in blue is the commercial. It's measured in kilometers of gill nets, and then on the bottom we have the recreational sport fishery measured in the angler hours. Last year, our Ontario commercial fishery set out 14,943 kilometers of gill net. That's a 57% increase from the previous year, but it is still below the long-term mean of 18,731 kilometers. The sport fishery effort for last year was about 2.9 million angler hours. This again is below the long-term mean of 5.7 million angler hours. We look at the commercial effort by management unit, same as before, moving from west to east. We see that in 2014, the largest increase in effort occurring in management unit 1 with over 7,000 kilometers of gill net. It's a 93% increase from the previous year. In management unit 2, we had over 4.4 thousand kilometers of gill net, and that's up 60% from the previous year. Management unit 3, we had just shy of 3,000 kilometers, or up 11% from the previous year. And down in the east end, 254 kilometers of gill net, down 16% from the previous year. Walleye sport fishery by management unit, angler hours in the millions on the side. We see that again moving from west to east with the largest percentage of effort in the West End at 1.6 million angler hours last year. That's up slightly 5% from the previous year. We see a decrease in management unit 2 of 9%, or 459,000 hours. And we see increases in management 3 and 4, with management unit 3 at 441,000 angler hours, up 87% from the previous year, or 358,000 MU4, up 21% from the previous year. When we look at the Lake Erie effort across the lake, again, blue being the commercial fish effort in Ontario, while the red dots is the sport fishery effort in US waters. The larger the dot, the greater the effort. And we see the majority effort coming out of the West End. Again, like the harvest in the commercial, we're seeing increases out of Wheatley, Erio, and Port Stanley, and a few scattered across, some effort scattered across the southern shores, in particular around Ashtabula, Erie, and down here in the east end. When we look at the harvest rate by the fisheries, again up here in blue, we have the commercial harvest rate measured in fish per kilometers of gill net. Last year, the rate was 86.5 fish per kilometers of gill net. It's down 35% from the previous year, and actually has been on a decline since looks like 2010 or so. This is below the long-term mean of 122.8 fish per kilometer of gill net. The sports harvest rate down on the bottom in red, with measured in fish per hour. We see an increase this year of about 9% over last year. The rate is 0.51 fish per hour. This is above the long-term mean of 0.43. We look at the age composition of the fishery itself. We see that the 2003 year class, or 7 and older fish, just isn't going away. It still represents a large proportion of these older fish, which makes up almost 40% of both fisheries. The next largest groups here are the 2010 and 2011 as 3 and 4 year olds at around 20% each. The mean age of the fish in the fisheries, here we have the red, which is the sport fisheries on top. It's actually just below, the average age is just below 7. I've rounded up on here, but it's about 6.5 as a mean age. It's up 10% from the previous year. And the commercial fisheries is around 6 years of age as a mean age, up 15% from the previous year. And this is pretty much reflective of that 2003 year class that's still going through the fisheries. Just to summarize, 2014 TAC was set at 4.027 million, was set at 20% of the 2013 TAC of 3.356 million fish. 66% of the TAC was harvested last year versus the previous year, 72%. As I mentioned earlier, the commercial fisheries harvested 1.292 million fish, or 3% change from the previous year, and is below the long-term mean of just over 2 million fish. The sport fishery harvested 1.57 million fish. It's a 23% increase from 2013, but still below the long-term mean of 2.346 million fish. The fisheries was dominated by the 2003, 7, 10, and 11 year classes. The walleye effort for commercial fisheries, 14,943 kilometers. It's a 57% increase from the previous year, but below the long-term mean of 18,731 kilometers. And then the sport effort was 2.9 million angler hours, 11% increase, but still below the long-term mean. The catch per unit of effort for the commercials was 86.5 fish per kilometer, down 35% from 2013 and below the long-term mean. And then the sports, 0.51 fish per angler hour, up slightly from the previous year and above the long-term mean of 0.43. We look at recruitment. So this is a map of this young of the year trawl conducted by Ontario and Ohio combined. Again, on the legend here, the zeros represent no catch. The larger the dot, the higher the density of YY in the trawl. And we see higher densities here in Ontario waters and around the islands. When we look at the yearlings from the same trawl series, red would indicate that we did catch yearlings in the trawl. Your black dot would represent 0 catches in that series. This is a map of dissolved oxygen readings at those trawl sites. The Walleye Task Group has a threshold of less than 2 milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen, and that site does not get included into the trawl series calculations. However, we have had no dissolved oxygen issues whatsoever in the West End at the time of the trawl, everything being over 7 milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen. When we look at the age 0 Lake Erie interagency trawl, so again, this is Ohio and Ontario pooled data. You see for 2014, looks like one of the second highest since this Whopper 2003 year class came through. It's just below the 3rd quartile. It's about the 73rd percentile in the time series, slightly above 2010, and that's the 2007 year class that still shows up in the fisheries. Just to recap the 2014 and future recruitment, 2014 year class is classified as moderate to strong, 73rd percentile. 2013 is weak to moderate, only 42nd percentile, whereas 2012 and 2011 are poor year classes, 23rd and 27th percentile. Walleye stock estimates. So this is just to summarize a little bit what Renee talked about just before me here. In terms of LEC, we are using the LEC model that was used for the management evaluation strategy. It does interact with the stock recruitment model to estimate biological reference points, estimate selectivity for the fisheries and the surveys. We use a multinomial age composition estimation. The YOY trawl data is integrated into the catch at age model. We are applying a random walk catchability for fisheries and all surveys, and we're doing the same thing for the integration of the YOY into the index as well. This would be the abundance estimate and projection into 2015. Right here, next year, as we apply the model, we're looking at a projection of 24 million fish in 2015. You can see through the time series for the state of lake reporting that we have seen a decrease in abundance over the time series. This is just the same graph, but just truncated into a shorter time series from 2014 to 2004. So when we, using the results from the integrated model, we get an estimation of age 2 and older fish of 24 million fish walleye. We applied the harvest policy with a target reference point of 60% FMSY and a limit reference point of 20% in spawner, unfished spawner biomass. We calculated the mean REH for 2014 at 4.14 million fish with a minimum of 3.18 million fish to a maximum of 5.19 million fish. The target fishing rate is 0.316, was applied because the probability that the projected spawner biomass in 2016 of 28.858 million kilograms could fall below the limit reference point of 11.08 million kilograms is less than 5%. So therefore we no need to invoke this P-star or probabilistic control rule. This shows the final constraint that LEC has agreed to, which is this 20% rule of the previous year quota. So this would be last year's quota, the 20%, this year's REH, the max and the min. Folks will like to know that there are copies of the executive summary at the back. There are annual reports that can be found on the GLFC website, or if you want a hard copy, you can actually ask me, Todd, an LEC member, an STC member, and we'll get your name and address, send you mail out a copy. And finally, I'd like to thank MSU and QFC for their ongoing assistance with the modeling, GLFC for dispersing reward tags and checks and thank you letters, and finally ODNR for providing facilities for the winter task group meetings.